This is Your Other Brothers Podcast.
Fear, you're not my lover, you're not my friend, you're not my brother. Oh, and no, there's no room here. There's a vacancy in my heart, but it ain't for fear.
Welcome, friends, and happy Pride Month. From the Jewel of the Blue Ridge, my name is Tom. I'm like all out of sorts. I've totally botched this intro. This is Your Other Brothers Podcast, and we're a community navigating faith, homosexuality, and masculinity together. Yes, let's get to our episode today. We've got a jam-packed episode, so let's waste no time. From the City of Oaks, it's our other brother, Ryan. What's up, Ryan?
Hey, happy Pride, friends.
Happy Pride, happy Pride. And once again, he's a regular now. Totes a regular. From the Folksy Tundra. Not the Frozen Tundra, which was last episode. The Folksy Tundra, it's our other brother, Aaron.
Hello, glad to be with you all.
We went more tundra-y than you last week with our dear brother Will. Such a great episode. You guys, yeah, let's not beat around the bush. We're talking about Pride today, which could be lots of things. It could be the adjective, it could be the noun, it's probably a verb. I think it is a verb. Oh, Miss Queen Miriam, she has some thoughts about Pride. We're gonna get to her later. But
of course.
She
has something to say about everything, doesn't she?
I mean, it's kind of her job, right? It's what she does. But yeah, we're talking about Pride Month, and I was talking with the guys beforehand because this is an episode which we've never done, and if we were going to do it, it was like now or never. Not necessarily never, but we're not going to do a Pride Month podcast in September or December or something. Even though as I was researching this, I saw that some parts of the world celebrate Pride in various parts of the year, especially if June is like a sweltering month that they don't want to celebrate in certain parts of the world. So theoretically we could have done it during a month that another part of the world celebrates this month. But I figured now would be a great time as ever. It actually came up organically on actually, one of our yobbers posted about it in the Facebook group, and it comes up here and there with our Discord channel as well. But yeah, I saw the conversation happening, and I kind of thought, you know what? I think let's do it. Let's dive into this conversation. So, Ryan, Aaron, I'm glad you guys are here. I'm glad we're here to talk about Pride/Pride Month. I guess those are used interchangeably, and yeah, looking forward to hopefully a really good, hopefully illuminating, hopefully, yeah, just a great conversation. I referenced the last episode with Ben and Will, which, by the way, got some really great, amazing feedback from listeners. So thank you guys for reaching out about this episode because it was their first time through the ringer. It was like, why not? I'm pretty sure it was the first time we've ever had two new people on the same episode. So it was like a little bit of an experiment, like, okay, let's see how this goes. But it went really well. We got some great feedback about side B objections, and I love their perspectives as pastors. So big shout out to those two guys. Thank you guys for taking the time. Hopefully they'll be back. If you want to pester them to come back, please, by all means, you guys send them emails to come back into the YOBcast, because I really enjoyed having them. And I have to address the elephant in the room, because Ryan, I don't know if you listened to the episode, but we did lust over your hair in that episode. So I just wanted to make sure there's no awkward vibes in the room right now.
If there weren't before, there are now. Yeah, I did listen to it. I meant to call into the Yob line and make a comment about it, but I'll use this opportunity to say I'm just starting to feel a lot of pressure around my hair. Like I might, you don't know, I might snap and just shave it all off.
Oh my gosh, that would be so tragic. That would be
So just careful with the pressure,
That's true. Thank you it would have been interesting if you called in, but then you're on the episode. So like you're on this episode. So if we like went to the voicemail segment in a little bit and then we heard your voice, that could have been fun. We missed a moment there, but thank you for chiming in. Yeah, no, we had fun from the Yobbers bracket to yeah, talking about Yobbers hairstyles. Like Ryan, your hair has had a good 2021 in Yob world. And I've had, you guys, I just wanted to chime in real quick because as things are getting better in the world and I'm starting to travel more, over Memorial Day, I got to travel again, and it was really great to be able to connect with some Yobbers out there. So it was awesome to connect with something that I've not done a whole lot of, honestly. Like I was trying to think, like I'm pretty sure that was the first trip I've taken outside of my family. Like I've seen my family over the year. But I'm pretty sure that was my first trip outside of Asheville to see people who are not blood related to me, pretty much. So I hope to do more of that because I love connecting with our Yobbers, or really anyone. If you whether you're pledging on Patreon or not, like I've connected over the years with so many of you guys who listen or who read what we put out at yourotherbrothers.com. So yeah, if you're ever passing through the Jewel of the Blue Ridge, hit me up. I am officially down to grab coffee once again. And it's something that I quite enjoy doing. So shout out to the people I connected with over the weekend, and hopefully more travels, more connections, more meetups in store as our blessed year goes on. I wanted to mention this, Ryan, because part of my trips, well, all of my trips this month, have involved some sort of national park visit. So I took an extended trip out to California and saw several national parks. And then over Memorial Day, I was in Kentucky, and so I went to Mammoth Cave National Park. And I've done this thing, Ryan, and it started with you. It started with you and me when we went to Glacier National Park in Montana. I've just decided I'm going to start collecting coasters from national parks, and not like flimsy, cheap coasters that die after a year. Like these are legit like ceramic tile coasters with like really beautiful artwork. Actually hold this up for our video audience. I don't know if I'll put this in the video, but this is the one I got at Mammoth Cave, and you can kind of see the descending staircase going down into the Mammoth Cave. And so Ryan, like it started with Glacier. I now have like, I don't know, 7 or 8 of these little ceramic tile coasters spread around my apartment. And I figured this is my fate. This is now what I'm doing. Every time I go to a national park, I have to get a ceramic tile coaster to commemorate the experience.
Before you know it, you're going to have like 85 coasters and like 2 friends over.
I know it's starting to get a little like, it was really cute at first, like, okay, 3 over on this table, 2 on that table, but now it's like, have I reached my limit? Like, where am I going to put all these coasters? Assuming, the hope is that eventually I see every single national park, which there's like, I don't know, 60 or 70 or something. So I don't know. We'll see where this goes. But this was the question I wanted to bring to you guys, is like, national parks or otherwise, when you visit a place, like when you go to a city, when you go to a park, when you go to a theme park, like, I don't know, whatever the place is, do you feel any kind of compunction to like get something tacky to remember it by? Is that something that anyone else out there struggles with? Because it used to be way worse for me. Like I've consolidated all of my energies into coasters, because for me, I used to get magnets. I used to get like stickers. I used to get, I don't know, you name it, like little tacky things you put on your desk. Like I was crazy. I would collect so many just stupid, junky things. So I was curious though, if that's something that you guys ever do, if you ever feel the need to collect things when you go places.
No, I am so allergic to kitsch. Like I just don't I want an empty desk, and I want an empty fridge face, and I just don't want little knickknacks and cartoon art of a moose with a national park name on it. Yeah, I just don't want any of that.
What about you, Aaron? Any compunction to collect things?
I come from a family of collectors, so it's genetically just wired into me a little bit. My grandma collected thousands of egg cups over her lifetime, and my mom is a magnet collector. Egg cups.
Wait, thousands?
Thousands, Ryan.
Wait, what is an egg cup? Is it exactly what it sounds like? You put the eggs in the cup?
So soft-boiled eggs, I think, used to be more common than they were today, or at least are more common in other countries. But my Swedish grandmother, she has a collection of, they're just little, basically egg-shaped cups that you put a soft-boiled egg in. And then when you crack the top, like it holds the egg while you eat the inside of the soft-boiled egg out. So that's its technical, utility. but in reality, it is an excellent option for lining shelves and shelves and shelves in your basement or in your upstairs sitting rooms for other people to enjoy and see. So yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Aaron. I want to visit your grandmother and be like, "Wow, I love your shot glass collection."
I know. Well, actually, that leads me into my other collection. My mom started buying me shot glasses when I was like in elementary school. I know. I think when I was a kid, like I loved root beer and I saw people doing shots of things and I wanted to take a shot, and my mom let me do shots of root beer and she thought it was hilarious. So she then started buying me shot glasses everywhere. And I bought shot glasses for a while, but to your point, Tom, there comes a time when you just have too many. Like I have boxes now that I just took from my parents' house, and I'm not going to put them up somewhere. I don't know what to do with them. So I've got boxes of shot glasses that I don't need. And so I've kind of stopped my collecting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, on the one hand, because we've referenced Queen Marie Kondo, we reference her from time to time, and she really did teach me to get rid of the things that don't spark joy. So I will say legitimately, these coasters do spark joy because they're beautiful. It fits the travel motif that I have going. If you come to my apartment, whoever's out there listening, if you come to my apartment, there's lots of maps and there's lots of just travel-y things, park things, and so it does spark joy. There's a legitimate sparking of joy, but I wonder if that spark is still going to be there 70 coasters from now. That is a question hanging in the air. So we'll see. Hopefully I don't have to answer that question in the next 12 to 18 months. But yeah, that is, and I think it also goes back to, we did a Strengths Finder episode back in the day. Maybe we'll do another Strengths Finder episode. This goes back to my strength of input, which at its greatest, it's that I like to remember things. I like to collect data. I like to collect memorable items. Like letters are huge for me. I love it when someone writes me a letter, and that's something that I love to save. So at its best, it's like very nostalgic, and it's very, it's just like, it's nice to remember things. But then at its worst, it turns into super hoarder, and like everything has a soul, and I can't throw anything away. And it just like took over my life for a while though. But yeah, Queen Marie Kondo, she helped me let go of a lot of things a couple years ago. So I'm grateful for her. Moving on, we joked about the voicemail segment. Ryan and Aaron, I sent this in a text to you a little while ago, but someone took it upon himself upon listening to, it was our love languages episode, the last episode you guys were on. We referenced a little show called Over the Garden Wall. Like this little, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like a weird cartoon. It's very, it has its own lane. Like it's hard to describe. I just got to check it out if y'all are curious. But someone took it upon himself after hearing that episode to call the Yob line. We love it when people call the Yob line. And he actually played the theme song on a piano for the voicemail. And I'm not going to play the whole thing. Because it goes on for like a minute or something, but I'm going to play the last couple seconds, because what's funny is I get email notifications when someone calls the Yob line, and it's a Google number. And so it'll transcribe the voicemail. And so I'll get like a little rough, it's never perfect, but it's like a rough transcript of what the person said on the voicemail. And so it was weird because I opened it up, and it's I can see that it's over a minute long, but then the transcript was only like 4 words long. And I was like, what? Did it just not hear him for the whole thing or what? But what happened was that he played the entire theme of this show. And then at the very end is when he decided to speak. So let's roll that part of the message, and then we'll discuss.
Yeah, so I'm a fan of Over the Garden Wall too.
Okay, so I don't know if either of you have anything to say.
That was beautiful, and I am dying to know who played that, but I'm not sure that we know.
Yeah, no, it's a cloud of mystery. Like,
it's a
who
mystery.
is this mystery person who called and played the piano and left us a message saying that he loves this show too? That was such an unexpected delight. I love unexpected delights on the Yob line. So thank you to you, mystery caller, for delighting us with that message. If anyone out there wants to call the Yob line, whether it's about an episode you hear today, like the conversation you hear today in this episode, or if you're going through the archives, we've had that happen before where people are starting to find the show and hear something on an episode long ago. Feel free. That's always fun to go blast from the past. If you guys have anything to say, any thoughts, any stories, any questions about a previous episode, give us a call, 706-389-8009. And you guys, we're jumping right into this conversation. The sponsor of this episode, I feel like this is the most obvious sponsor we've ever had. And that's okay. Sponsors don't have to be like cryptic or like, I don't know, like what's the tie-in to this topic? The sponsor for this episode, we're talking about Pride Month, is rainbow themed everything. Everything must be a rainbow. It could be a shirt. It could be flip-flops. It could be suspenders. It could be a coffee mug. What else? Guys, name random objects.
A bagel.
Rainbow.
An actual rainbow.
Rainbow.
An actual rainbow. It could be
rainbow colored rainbows.
Yeah, it could be flowers. I saw Pride rainbow
flowers.
flowers in the grocery store the other day.
Perfect. It's the sponsor. Everything's the sponsor today. Thank you, rainbow colored everythings, because this is the time. This is the time to shine. So we are grateful for the support as we dive into a conversation that I wouldn't say I'm uncomfortable with, but I'm curious to see where it goes. I'm curious to hear y'all's thoughts, and I'm curious to just like address it because Ryan, I don't know if you remember, you were around, you were blogging then. Aaron came a little later, but I completely forgot that in 2018 we did a collaborative blog post about Pride Month. Do you remember this? I totally forgot it even existed.
Yeah, I do remember that, and the comments. A lot of people had a lot to say. We got some good discussion going, right?
We did indeed. Yeah, this was every once in a while. We don't do them as often anymore. Maybe we should. I don't know. We'll see. But we used to do a lot of these collaborative blog posts where, I don't know, 5 or 6 of us on the site would kind of answer questions and respond and semi-talk to each other. Sort of like a podcast in blog form is kind of the vision, the hope for that. But we did one in 2018 in June, which is Pride Month. We did it, and it was called Can Christians... Actually, I have it written down. Can Christians Celebrate Pride Month? What a great title. And so we had a great conversation about that. And so I'll actually be referencing some things from that post as we have this conversation today. But yeah, I think from the start, I just want to start to get our feet wet and just like get y'all's thoughts on the aesthetics of Pride is what I've described it as, because I'm just going to be honest. Rainbows, loud colors, a loud aesthetic in general is not my cup of tea. I am way more of a subtle, dare I say, somber fellow. And so whether it's the aesthetics, the clothing aspect, or the whether it's flags, whether it's clothing, whatever it is, like the decor of Pride, that's always something I've resisted. And it's not because I hate the LGBT community or have this homophobic thing inside of me, but it's just because aesthetically, I just don't like rainbows. I don't know if either of you relate with that or if that factors into your feelings on Pride at all. But that's like my initial thought, just like if we're just being super surfacey. And Ryan, you actually, Ryan, I'm going to quote you. I don't know if you read what you said in that post. Are you ready for this? On the record with Ryan. Ryan, we'll see if you still agree. I'm curious to see if you still agree.
I'm curious.
Because this is what you said. You said, I feel ambivalent about rainbows and glitter, but I definitely don't like crowds. So I think that's the limiting factor for me. Like even if my favorite band is playing a show in my town, it's still a tough sell. Because that's the other aspect of Pride, is that it's like you picture these gigantic crowds in the streets, which is another limiting factor for me. That is, I don't like crowds either. So I don't like the loud color aesthetics of it, and then I also don't like being surrounded by hundreds and thousands of people shouting and screaming. That doesn't appeal to me just from a personality standpoint. So I wanted to see, Ryan, if that still holds true for you, and ask you furthermore, are you telling me if Sufjan Stevens came to Raleigh and wanted to play in your backyard, but 1,000 or 10,000 people would have to fill the streets, that you would not show up for that?
Oh, that's an obvious yes. Like Sufjan Stevens can pack out my entire neighborhood anytime he wants.
Okay, just checking.
But I would agree that generally I kind of avoid big crowds where it's hard to park and like it's just hard to know where to use the bathroom, and Yeah. And I think you're right. There's a very specific aesthetic for Pride, the audiovisual aesthetic, and I can appreciate what it means to be loud and to be visible and to take up space in the public forum and the public view. And so I can certainly appreciate like those aspects of pride and kind of celebrating that we can take up space in the public view and we can be loud. So I do appreciate that a lot. But like you said, the specific aesthetic of like rainbows and glitter isn't really like who I am. It's not really my personality. I mean, I'll have to send you a picture to post on like the notes, but I just reorganized my closet, and y'all, my hanging shirts are organized from black on one end to navy blue to slightly less dark navy blue to charcoal gray to light gray to white. And that's my closet. So
I was going to say, on this episode of Pride Month, on looking on the Zoom call, we've got gray, blue, and dark blue represented as far as what we're wearing. Yeah. So we're very festive right now.
Yeah, I'm maybe a problem child of the LGBT community.
You got your own rainbow from black to navy to white.
I was going to bring this up because I think, Ryan, it might have been you. Somebody posted on the Discord that I had no idea there was a gay man's flag, a gay male flag. And that is essentially my wardrobe because it's a beautiful flag it's basically like half of the flag is like the Yob colors, like the Yob color scheme. It's like all these shades of blue and gray. And it's a beautiful flag. If you guys haven't checked out the gay male flag, like that is a flag, that is an aesthetic I can rock. And in fact, I do rock that. That is like 85% of my wardrobe is all these shades of blue. So I can roll with that. What about you, Aaron? How do you feel? Yeah, just about both the visual and the audio, like the look and the feel of flags, colors, and crowds.
I like a good spectacle. I don't necessarily want to be in the spectacle.
I see.
I would enjoy experiencing it from a safe distance, seeing all the crazy and the chaos go on, and the colors. I would agree. The glitter, the rainbow. Yeah, maybe we're not the best people to be speaking on Pride since we're all bashing the rainbow and the festivity and stuff. But that's not so much my thing. I also I hold a little more to a covenant theology, which may or may not mean anything to people. But what that means for me is I think about scripture from a very covenantal perspective. And there's like the covenant that God made to Noah, and the rainbow is a really important part of that covenant. And so I still first and foremost think of the rainbow as a part of God's promise to never pour out wrath on the entire world in that way again. So to me, it's sort of like, it's nice. I understand why people like using it for the LGBT stuff and that it's a big part of Pride, but I don't necessarily look at it that same way. But I appreciate the idea, like you guys said, of a place for LGBT plus people to exist and to be in the public sphere. And especially, just from a very basic standpoint, like people who are attracted to the same sex or non-binary, whatever it may be, to be allowed to exist and not have to fear for, criminal prosecution and things like that. Like I can appreciate that side of it. I don't necessarily want to get down there and wear the rainbow and the glitter the same way and partake in the parades, but that particular aspect I can appreciate.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'd like to say that, I have to imagine if I show up at Pride in my current outfit, which is like heather gray and black and sweatpants that are not showing up on Zoom, like no one's going to say out, you're not gay enough. I think there's a recognition among the LGBT community that not everyone is going to not everyone's going to have the same aesthetic. And that's one thing that we want to, that we think is beautiful about the community. And so I think anyone who's listening, who's super into Pride, I don't want you to hear us and think that we're like not allowed because of our dull clothes. Yeah. I don't think that's how we feel.
Yeah. Our gray rags and sackcloth. Yeah, and there are plenty of people in our community, inside Yob or inside the greater Side B world, who can rock the rainbow everything. So that's we see you as well. It would be nice. It would have been kind of nice if we had someone on the show today who kind of was all about that look. but we have what we have. We have 3 gray blue boys, and that's just what we're gonna have to roll with. So that's where we are. Well, you guys, Queen Miriam, yes, she has things to say. Before we get too deep into Pride the month, I wanted to dive into Pride the word, and just start to unpack that word a little bit, and then go into the history of Pride, and then just kind of see where that leaves us as believers with a traditional belief, with a traditional sexual ethic, and kind of where that leaves us in this cultural thing of Pride Month, that is June, the month of June. So we love to go to her. We go to her time and time again, faithful and true. Queen Miriam, I think the last time we checked in with her, she had some things to say about masturbation, which was a delight. It was such a delight. Queen Miriam, I had no idea, you guys, Pride has so many definitions, both positively and not so positively. So the number one definition is the quality or state of being proud. Inordinate self-esteem, reasonable or justifiable self-respect, delight or elation arising from some act, possession, or relationship, like parental pride. So that's kind of on the positive side of the spectrum. Negative side of the spectrum, pride is proud or disdainful behavior or treatment, disdain, an ostentatious display. Oh, I'm sorry, this is like another definition, which I guess is more neutral. So an ostentatious display, a showy or impressive group. And then also, you guys, Pride is a company of lions. Can't forget the lions.
Thank you.
Honestly, Lions should have sponsored this show. Lions, where were you? Where were you, Lions? Yeah. Did you guys ever see Simba's Pride? It was like the Lion King sequel that was awful.
Possibly. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's
right.
called...
I think I've seen it, but have blocked it out along the way.
There was a sequel, you guys, to The Lion King called The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. And it's funny because it's his honor, but then it's also his pack of lions. See what they did there? So brilliant. A+ title, F- story.
They put all their budget into picking the title, obviously.
They did. I mean, they did great. They did great with the title.
But what a title, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of times in Christian culture, I feel like Pride Month, it's kind of looked down upon as this glorification of something that's negative. And I think it's important to realize that pride can be a positive thing. It depends on what you're using it for, what the context of it is. So I don't know. Yeah. Do you guys have any thoughts, pros and cons of pride being attached to this month, to this celebration, to the parades, to the clothing, to everything?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to recognize, like Miriam helped us to, that there are multiple definitions for the word pride, and anyone who is saying that pride is a sin, therefore Christians should not celebrate pride, is not really engaging with the concept very seriously. And that could be an unseriousness that comes from just ignorance of just not doing a good enough job listening to what we're saying pride is about, or it could be a willful unseriousness of equivocation that conflates like the wrong kind of pride, a bad sort of pride, with what Pride Month is about. I think I've heard it said that the pride we celebrate during Pride Month is not the opposite of humility, but rather the opposite of shame. And so
That's good.
And so I think that's a good thing to celebrate. That's a good thing to invest in, and it's a good thing to show joy about. And the other helpful thing that I've heard said about pride is that it's not so much a celebration of sexuality um, or promiscuity as it is a celebration of surviving. I mean, there's so much more that unites the LGBT plus community than sexuality, and definitely way more than any sense of promiscuity. I think there's a whole side of the community that's about surviving a world made by and for straight people, whether that's just surviving growing up in the closet, or if that's surviving AIDS or surviving violently homophobic backgrounds. Like that is something to celebrate as well, for sure.
Yeah, so many levels of survivability that you just rattled off right there. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well put.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very well put. I guess what I would say too is just exactly that. It's so much more about surviving, and I feel like that the kind of pride that's being celebrated is actually an important component of the gospel about God. You know, in the garden, Adam and Eve eat of the fruit, and they kind of first experience the shame in their nakedness and begin covering themselves up. And thus begins a journey of all of humanity trying to hide from God and trying to take components of who they are and make them unreachable by God. And certainly, you know, I get on a very, very surface level Christians who say, oh, well, pride is one of the 7 deadly sins, and why don't we have celebrations for the other deadly sins then if we're going to celebrate pride? And I agree. I think it's just it's either a willful misunderstanding or one just of ignorance. And, you know, there's something about being able to be known that I think is built into humans, and that God actually really wants for humans and for humanity. And the debate on sin and all that sort of stuff can be secondary to rejoicing along with people that they are able to be known and to be accepted in their community and by their creator ultimately.
I love that gospel take on it too, that we have good news, which is that God is proud of you.
Right.
God is proud of you. I was going to read a tweet from one of my favorite humans, one of my favorite Twitter followers, but one of my favorite humans too, Bridget Eileen Rivera, who has a book. She has a book coming out, and this book, I think this book is going to like rock the world. I can't wait for it. It's coming out later this year. But she tweeted this recently. Queer people are made in the image of God and precious in God's sight. Take pride in who you are because God takes pride in you. And that says nothing about like glorifying sin or like embracing sin or convictions that you don't hold to. It's just about like the essence. Sexuality, we talk about a lot in this community. Our sexuality has shaped so much about our personality, about our relationships with as men, relationships with other men, or if you're a woman, relationships with other women. Like it's infused into kind of who we are. And that doesn't mean we're having sex at every turn or watching gay porn at every turn. It's so much bigger than that. And so, yeah, the notion of God taking pride in you, like that is a beautiful image that I feel like a lot of people who grow up closeted, who grow up kind of in scary, abusive situations because of their sexuality, like they don't have such a clear picture of that, like maybe some others who are more fortunate do. And so, yeah, I really wanted to, I feel like before we get too deep into this conversation, I thought it would be good to dive a little into the history of pride. And I'm going to go straight to that blog post that I referenced because good old Dean, he's taking a yacht break right now, but his spirit lives on and his words live on. I wanted to read something that he contributed to our blog post from a few years ago because he's super knowledgeable about all this stuff. And I kind of knew a little bit about the history of pride, but nothing to the extent that he did. And so he put it really concisely in the blog post, which will be referenced, will be linked in our episode notes today. So if you wanted to read the whole conversation that we had, you can check it out in our show notes. But Dean said this about the history of pride, especially as it relates to Christian culture, to the church. He said this: "I think there are benefits to bringing this area of our culture into the light, and the history behind Pride Month's origins is something more people should know about. Pride stems from the reaction to the Stonewall Inn raid back in June 1969. This is why Pride Month is in June. The years following this raid were filled with major steps for the LGBT plus community, marches for affirmation of their humanity. They were fighting for the chance to be seen as people, something that the culture had not done for decades. I just don't know that this is something for believers worth fighting over. Let pride happen. There are more important issues at hand, like preaching the gospel to our communities around the world. I think that's going to have a much greater impact than frowning every June because affirming individuals celebrate their theology." And that bleeds into just like, the Christian reaction. We'll talk about that later as well. But that's kind of, the beginnings of Pride and how it relates to the month of June. I mean, I feel like if I only knew the bare bones of that, then I feel like typical straight macho dude probably doesn't know any of that. He probably has no idea where this came from or what the climate of the world was or what the climate of the country was in the 50s and the 60s, especially when police were raiding establishments, especially gay bars. Like this, that's like a foreign world for millennials like us, for people who are not from that generation or from that era.
Right. They didn't teach us the history of Pride in Awana.
I was gonna say, at my Christian school, I did not learn this in U.S. history. Where was this lesson? I feel like this should have been taught in some capacity, but it was, like many other things, just ignored, conveniently swept away. So yeah, I mean, I would encourage anyone, if you're not familiar with the Stonewall riots or the climate of the country back then, like it's worth just investigating. It's worth learning about because that plays out all these decades later as to what are people celebrating? What are we free from or fighting, continuing to fight for years later? Like that's the roots of these parades and these marches all around the country all month long. Yeah, so I wanted to start to talk about it because we talked about it a little bit in the blog post, but the concept of would you participate in Pride? Would you go to a parade? Would you wear certain clothing that you wouldn't normally wear? Would you, whatever participate means, like, because I'll just be brazenly honest. This has never even been a thought in my mind. Like I've had zero thoughts whatsoever to participate in Pride. And this conversation, like starting with the discussion that we mentioned on the Facebook group and the Discord, like I'm starting to at least process it and now think about it more. Like, would I, yes or no, would I know? So I kind of wanted to hear y'all's thoughts. If you have participated, I feel like you've indirectly shared whether you have or you haven't, but then if you haven't, like, have you thought about it or to what context, like to what degree? Like I'd be curious to hear from you guys about that.
So I have not, and in spite of my previous objections about crowds and parking and bathrooms and everything, I actually did like look up what the Raleigh Pride plan was for this year, and it turns out they're not having it. I really did actually want to go to Pride this year, hopefully before we recorded this podcast, because I do feel like a little bit of a fool sitting here talking about Pride without ever having been. So I was like, well, I know how to solve this. I can go and then I can have something to talk about. But it turns out I'm just a fool sitting here recording my thoughts about Pride. But yeah, I do want to go. I would
in your gray black shirt.
No my less. Gray black shirt. I would be open to putting on like a rainbow bandana. I think that would be kind of cool.
Like an accessory.
Like
yeah,
like a rainbow accessory. I don't need a whole rainbow outfit, and I think that would be fine. So it would be neat to go. So in 2022, I'm going on the record. I am making a public commitment. I will go to Pride in Raleigh in 2022 next year.
So let me follow up with you then before we get to Aaron. Like, So when you go, we're not saying if we've determined that you're going, when you go next year, assuming another pandemic hasn't swallowed the face of the world, what is your plan? What is your hope? Like, are you there to watch? Are you there to bring a sign? What are you there to do?
I will not be riding on a float. I don't think. I mean, I don't think I would bring a sign. I'm reserving the right to change my mind about this, but sure. I think I would just go and be a spectator and look around. I mean, I kind of suspect Raleigh Pride is pretty tame and just has like a bunch of booths from like the LGBTQ center and I don't know, like maybe some companies.
Right.
Yeah. So I would just go and look around, maybe like, I don't know if they're like rainbow cupcakes or something, maybe buy a cupcake and see if I know anyone and then peace out.
I can get down with some rainbow cupcakes. That's more my jam.
Do you want to come to Raleigh Pride next year?
Ooh, I can't definitively say when versus you're saying when, but we'll see. TBD.
Okay.
I think I would be way more comfortable going to Pride if I had someone with me, certainly.
Probably same. Yeah, definitely.
And I would say if you're going to go to Raleigh Pride, you might as well come to Asheville Pride if you really want.
I bet Asheville Pride would have some better stories.
Yeah, no, if you're looking for, I feel like it's year round. It's Asheville Pride, but especially the month of June. Yeah, there's things to behold here. Yeah, I have more thoughts to share in a second, but Aaron, I wanted to go to you. Yeah, what are your thoughts on attending Pride, or have you thought about it? Or you mentioned a little bit, like to be a spectator, to see it unfold.
Well, and if there are cupcakes involved, I mean, I'll pretty much go anywhere for a cupcake. So again, not a bad idea. I think I've considered it before. I've thought about doing it. Honestly, my biggest reservation is just that it's in downtown Minneapolis and it's a pain to get downtown and park, especially when there's a big spectacle going on.
Goes down to parking.
So, yeah. But I think with a group of friends, it'd be really interesting, fun, probably very educational, and it'd be fun to engage with more of my local community. So yeah, I'd be interested. And if you're going to go to Asheville, you might as well come to Minneapolis, a big city Pride, just see what's going on.
Yeah,
we'll hit the Pride circuit next year, maybe.
Yeah. Well, here's a question, because again, I think there's so many layers to this, and the hope of this part of the conversation is like the perception, or like what are we, or the motivation and the perception. Like, what are we going, if we go to Pride, who are we going for? What are we going for? Is it for us? Is it for supporting just our fellow humans, regardless of our differences in belief, like just supporting them? Are we doing it for the greater church to show like that we're not cruel, heartless, awful people? Like what is behind the motivations? Like, so I'll go back to Ryan again. Like, when you say when you're going, like, what is your impetus? What is your primary impetus, or what is your collection of impeti I think for going?
Well, I think I recognize that since I've never been and experienced it, like I am missing part of the picture of what Pride is about, and part of what's going on in LGBTQ culture. And so I think for me, the motivation there is just to have a fuller, better picture. And you don't have to be queer. You don't have to be SSA to want to see a fuller, better picture of a community in your city. And so I think that's a fair enough motivation to go. And I think that, yeah, there are other good reasons to go that you mentioned, like showing up as the church, showing up as the body of Christ, to show love and care, and to live out what Bridget Eileen said about God takes pride in the people who are there wearing rainbows and glitter for Pride.
I wanted to share. I have some Yobber comments and feedback that I might try to sprinkle into these conversations. But there's one guy that said, and I'm kind of in this limbo, because I don't know where I've landed. Like, I would be willing to go for the life experience, and like you said, Ryan, to fill in the gaps and just to have another picture of humanity that I don't have. Like, I have hearsay, I have images on a screen, but I don't have like the lived, living, breathing humans in front of me experience that I would definitely appreciate as well. When it came to, though, identifying like with your fellow man with you, one of our Yobbers said this: I would like to go, but I can't escape this question. Would event organizers allow a float for folks like us? My guess is no, though ultimately I can't be sure. This is my biggest obstacle to participating in an authentic sense. And so that's something that I struggle with to some extent. It's like, 'cause that's the rift in this whole world, is like, if you identify as gay, it feels like you can piss off everybody. You can piss off Christians, certainly, who say you shouldn't use that word. And then there are certainly potentially affirming people who also think you're not using that word properly if you're not dating men, if you're not pursuing a romantic sexual relationship with a man. Not all gays, certainly. There's plenty of affirming gay people who are comfortable with folks like us using the label gay, even though we're living out a life of celibacy as single men right now. Like, does that enter into y'all's minds at all, as far as participating in Pride, of feeling like you wouldn't necessarily be quite welcomed?
I think that's part of the struggle, being caught in the middle, being a minority of a minority, on both sides, with being Christian and being gay, and trying to figure out how do you navigate your faith with that, but also trying to figure out how do you navigate being Christian or gay in a broader sense as part of like the overall LGBT community. So I think that's a really interesting question. If there was a float for Yob, or just to even represent side B Christians generally, would it be allowed there, and would it be celebrated by the community there, or would it be hated and rejected and made fun of? I don't know. I feel like it could go either way depending on who you have around you. But I think also, just like the LGBT plus community had a fight to have a voice, that's no different for any minority, really. And we have to fight to have a voice too. And I think it's fair for us to fight to have a voice both inside the church, but also inside of the LGBT plus community. And so then it's kind of like, well, maybe that's another reason we go, is to just make it known in the world and in that community that we actually exist, and that there's not just a few weirdos doing this thing, but actually there's an organization, community, there's groups of people who believe this and are somehow able to do that without hating anybody who disagrees with them. And I think that's what we want. That's what the LGBT community, supports, is diversity and accepting people as they are. And I think we want to be able to be accepted as we are, and to accept other people as we are, regardless of how we feel about lifestyle choices and the issue of sin.
Yeah. Yeah. If like a side B life, if that was represented, if we ever had a flag, can you imagine if there was a flag for this filled with bees, or I don't know. I see a lot of bee icons, emoticons on Twitter. If you go on Twitter, you'll see bees everywhere. It's like our little code language that we have. So if there was a flag, or if there was, stuff that you could wear, like, would that be welcome at this place? And like you said, Aaron, maybe it would be in certain places. Maybe I'm just being super cynical about it. But then I also, there's a lot of me that thinks that in certain places it definitely wouldn't be welcome. And so that's tricky for me to navigate in my head when I think about personally participating in Pride versus being a spectator.
I think, okay, versus being a spectator, I see what you're saying. I mean, I guess I haven't really thought of it that way, because I haven't really thought of Pride as mine and about me.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I think that, like, if they didn't want like a side B float, like, okay, like there's plenty of other things for us to find solidarity on. There's plenty of other common ground, I think.
We talked about it in the blog a little bit, like, should churches participate? And in that blog conversation, Eugene, shout out to Eugene, he mentioned that a group that he's a part of in the St. Louis area, that they attended Pride. This was, again, 2018. So it might have been 2017. I don't even know when this was, several years ago. But that they attended the Pride Month parade in St. Louis that year. And they were handing out water bottles to people. This was like kind of random and great timing, but I get notified whenever the whole internet will link in some way your other brothers to something that's written. So a blog post, an article, what have you, like it gets pinged into our system. And so it was by fate this week, someone wrote about that blog post. And it's a little heavy. And my initial thought was I would read like a sentence from it, but then it was like, there's a lot of actually just honest stuff here. And I think it's stuff that people need to hear. Like people need to hear how we are perceived. Both Yob, but then the greater picture is the church. It's helpful for this perspective to be known. So I'm going to do a little bit of reading. So Aaron, Ryan, you can just like settle back. You can sip your cocoa and whatever else you got in your gray, black, and dark blue clothing, and just listen in, because I thought this was just really interesting that they wrote about this, and they linked a bunch of posts. It wasn't just Yob, and they never called out Yob or anything by name, but there was a link to this post, this conversation that we've referenced today. So I just wanted to read it. It's an article called "A Note to Churches During Pride. If you're not LGBTQ affirming, keep your water." So that hasn't already told you the direction where this is going. Let's dive right in. So here's what the author says. And I looked for a name. I didn't see a name attached to this article. So anyway, if I see a name later, I'll be sure to link that or I'll name it in the episode notes. But I'll put a link to this as well for people to read if they want to read the whole thing. Here's what this person said. "I certainly do not speak for all LGBTQ folks on this issue, nor do I speak for any particular organization. I speak only for myself. And as a transgender woman and ex-evangelical, I have exactly one very strong opinion in this regard. Non-affirming Christians should stay away from Pride, and the representatives of individual churches that host booths or floats should be entirely transparent and forthcoming about where their denominations stand on same-sex marriage and LGBTQ affirmation. Of course, some non-affirming Christians will show up to Pride events. They always do. But it's not the raving street preachers I'm worried about. They're at least honest about who they are, and they often find themselves surrounded by angels who drown out their hate. Sometimes when a street preacher walks around with a ridiculously large banner proclaiming hellfire, someone falls in with a trolling sign that reads, 'This guy needs a hobby.' No, I'm more concerned about the Christians who definitely believe that same-sex relationships and transgender identities are sinful, but who deliberately obscure their harmful views beneath messaging focused on love, or even in apologizing to LGBTQ individuals for the mistreatment we've suffered at the hands of Christians. If memory serves, it was about 3 or 4 years after I started grad school in 2004 that I first learned there are evangelical Protestants, non-affirming of course, who show up to Pride events and hand out water or snacks. Someone I knew from the Christian school I graduated from told me about participating in one such initiative. At that point, while I'd become an advocate of LGBTQ rights, I hadn't even recognized my own queerness. I'd also never been to Pride and had no idea what the parades and festivities were like. Naturally, I couldn't articulate then why what she described didn't sit entirely well with me. Now I can do so easily. These efforts amount to deliberately deceptive bait-and-switch tactics, and they center anti-LGBTQ Christians' feelings over the feelings, health, and welfare of LGBTQ folks. For people who are supposedly against the bearing of false witness, non-affirming Christians invested in respectability sure are eager to deceive people with respect to their welcoming of members of the LGBTQ community. And then towards the end of this article, this person says, if you're really serious about wanting to be decent toward queer people, you ought to save your apologies and your bottled water and stay home. Be quote unquote straight with us. It's the honest approach. So you can read the whole thing. It's very well written. Like, I really appreciate this person's honesty. Like, it was really refreshing, kind of in a sense, to read that. But yeah, and I appreciated also her like mentioning at the beginning that she does not represent the entire LGBTQ community. So this does not represent every single gay or queer or transgender person with respect to non-affirming Christians coming to parades to hand out snacks or water or what have you, just to be there. But it represents some portion of people that are there. And that's always, again, I think when I think about Pride Month and how I would celebrate or participate or spectate, I think those are the two things in my head. Is like, the one is like, personally, it just doesn't appeal to me from the aesthetic, like we mentioned at the top. But then secondly, I just wonder, like, would I be welcome there? Is it better if I do just stay at home? Like this person seems to want me to do. Like that plays in my head. I don't know if that's something you guys have thought about or processed, or if that, like, we can't necessarily do or not do things because there's always going to be a portion of the population who doesn't agree with what you're doing. So it's not like we can live our lives in fear to that degree. But but that's a perspective that is out there that I wanted to make sure got heard, because again, they happen to link to our one of our blog posts. So I appreciate the chance to dive into this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good way to hand out water bottles, and there's a bad way to hand out water bottles. You know, there's probably multiple good ways to hand out water bottles and multiple bad ways to hand out water bottles. And like, if I don't know, I just don't think a water bottle is a promise that represents a bait and switch necessarily. So I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously this woman has had a really bad experience with evangelicals, and I can certainly empathize with that. But I think that, like, I don't know. I think that there are evangelicals, there are non-affirming evangelicals out there that really are making like a good faith effort to build bridges, and I don't think the building bridges is always centered on those evangelicals wanting to not feel homophobic. I think often that can be a problem, but I think that sometimes people show up with water bottles, and like, it's a sweet thing. I don't know. Like, can it sometimes be a sweet thing?
Yeah, for sure. And everyone has a story. Everyone has a reason why they do the things they do or say the things they say. So, I mean, it's not like she just decided to not like Christians or evangelicals one day. Like, there's a history there that we don't have in that article, but yeah, that clearly factors into the perspective that she has.
There's a lot of people who go to these events who don't hand out water bottles well. You know, I think that the concern is valid and the opinion is valid and the view is good. But that being said, you know, there's research. Probably some of our viewers are familiar with the book Messy Grace by Caleb Kaltenbach.
We just read that book as part of our book club.
Hey,
shout out to the book club.
It's a great read. And if you like what he has to say, you should check out his other book, Us versus Us. And it's a little less narrative. It's much more a deep dive into research that he did on LGBT plus people and the church. And he was peer reviewed by people from the affirming side, the non-affirming side, atheists, and generally his research is, viewed to be pretty fair and good. One of the things he talks about is 80%, something around that number, of people who are LGBTQ plus were in a church at some point, and not just were loosely affiliated with the church, but regularly attended some sort of church, whether it be Protestant or Catholic. A Christian church generally was the majority of that. And I think it's important to remember there's a lot of background. People have a lot of background in church. A lot of times there's a lot of negative background. But some of the follow-up research he did is, okay, so why did people leave the church? And what would it take to get people to come back to the church who are LGBT plus? And oddly enough, the leading reason has nothing to do with theology. It doesn't have to do with whether a church is affirming or non-affirming. It has a lot more to do with whether or not a church is just decent. If the people there are decent to the person, whether they are loving and treat them as human. And I think that's valid too. You know, there's people who disagree, who feel like if the church isn't affirming, then there's no way they would ever step foot in there. And I think that's fair. But if you trust the research that he did, it suggests that there's a whole lot more people who theology isn't the primary issue. It's actually, if the church could go to them and prove that they see LGBT plus people as human and are willing to love them and support them and come alongside them, and not just focus on their sexuality and not make them a project and not just make it all about their sexuality, that they might actually find that they have a home in the church. So I think how do you do that if you don't try to engage? Maybe Pride isn't the right place to engage. And I could see that being a fair argument. But I think that also it's important to remember the intent. Not everybody who's going to Pride and handing out water bottles is trying to necessarily change the theology of the people there either. It is just simply sometimes trying to help people understand that the church has been terrible on the subject historically, and not every single Christian is that way. So I think there's a place for that, but whether or not that time or place is at Pride is maybe something that could be discussed further.
Yeah. If you're handing out water bottles with a tract, probably shouldn't be going.
Right. Yeah, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, maybe don't do that. And also maybe this kind of goes back to the non-affirming float question. Like, I would say if somehow all the queer people involved in Pride voted and said, we don't want non-affirming evangelicals handing out water bottles at this event, I think churches should respect that. Because straight people at my church, Pride isn't about you, and yeah, but I think it gets more complicated, and I think this is an important thing that the author of this post has to wrestle with, is like, hey, I'm not affirming and I am gay, and if you're not willing to have a place at the table for me, then I'm not sure what your ideology is. I don't know how you're being consistent there. And so if I decide to show up and hand out water bottles as a non-affirming kind of sort of evangelical, then hey, you know what, I guess there's room to explore more of the nuance there.
I think it's time we formally create a side B flag, and you just we use that.
I'm into that.
Go for it.
I feel like it's not outside the realm of possibility. I think there's a lot of talented people in our community, this huge community, that could certainly put that together. I'd be curious to see, if that ever happens. This can be the last huge thing we talk about in this episode is the sexualization of Pride. That's a huge concern, especially the the more conservative you go, people's visions. And maybe it's probably, I'd imagine for a lot of people, it's just hearsay, images on a screen, or just your whatever first things come to mind when you think about a bunch of gay people in the streets. You just think of a lot of nakedness or a lot of just lewd behavior. That's not to say that doesn't happen places. I'm sure there are places where that does happen, but I'd be curious. Yeah. What do you guys have? Ryan, when you go to Pride, whether it's Asheville, whether it's Raleigh, whether it's Minneapolis, wherever you go, and there's a very sexual, lewd sort of atmosphere, maybe not in the entire place, but maybe just in pockets of it, or one single pocket of it. How do you respond to that? Or how do you, or the bigger picture is, how do you address that concern from conservative or evangelical parents who say Pride is just all about sex romps in the streets?
I guess I would tell those parents, hey, this controversy is happening inside the LGBT community also. And people say, hey, we can't be running around in jock straps and thongs if we want people to be queer people are normal too, and so I think I would say that, this isn't a settled issue. There's controversy within the community about this also. And if you're worried about that, don't bring your kids. No one's telling you show up at Pride. As a straight person, no one cares that you're not there. No one cares that your kids aren't there. And so, but if you do bring your kids, that, I think that's going to push Pride to be more of a family-friendly event over time. People are going to say, hey, people are bringing kids to this. Maybe, um, maybe let's think of ways to engage the whole community and represent the whole community, but in a way that isn't that is family appropriate for parts of it. I don't know. I think there's lots of ways to solve this, and I'm not going to be the one to solve it. And I don't really have a dog in that fight. But that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I would say too, it's kind of, you're kind of ignoring the rest of culture if you think pride is the only hypersexualized thing that is out there right now.
Preach.
Think about like our media, our entertainment, everything. Some places it's straight sexualization, and at Pride it happens to be LGBT plus sexualization. And I don't think that, as Christians, we can say that over sexualization of things is not something we like. And I think that's okay. But let's not forget that if you're going to pick on Pride for that, you have to start thinking about what you're watching on TV, what you're letting your kids watch, what you're reading, what kind of news you're watching. It's everywhere now. It's on commercials. It's on the billboards as you drive down the street. And, at some point, we're called to live in the world and not be of the world. Like, I think we should be unashamedly Christians who unashamedly Christian and be okay with being different. If you're a small business that doesn't want to put up the rainbow flag and you're worried about what that'll do, follow your convictions. That's what we're called to do as Christians. But we're going to be in the world. So there's going to be organizations who put on a rainbow flag. And unfortunately, there's going to be an entire country and culture that puts sex on everything. And we don't have to like it, but it is the reality we're in. And let's talk about it holistically instead of singling out the particular areas that we're less comfortable with than others.
That's so good. Yeah. Why pick on Pride people for being over sexualized? And that's where like the piece of actually going, I think, would be very helpful, because I'm confident that if you go to a Pride parade, it's not going to be 100% sexualized everywhere you go. Like I know it's not. And so it'd be helpful to actually like experience that and put that together. And like I said, there might be parts of the country where it is maybe more sexualized than other parts of the country, or parts of a single parade that are more than others. But just to like, I think it changes a lot when you can go to a place like that and experience it in person versus just relying on hearsay and just relying on all the negative connotations that go with hearsay sometimes. So that would be another reason that I would be inclined to go, just to remove that cynical thought from my head. Well, you guys, I wanted to close with something that Jacob said on that blog post. Shout out to our other brother, Jacob. And it goes back to just kind of the beauty in our sexuality. And it's something that we hope to highlight again and again as we have these conversations on the podcast or on the blog. But he had this to say, and actually closes out our blog post, so you guys can check out Jacob's thoughts on all of this. But he said this: one of my biggest issues with Pride events or Pride Month in general is the very commonly used phrase, love is love. Interestingly enough, my problem isn't with the phrase itself, but rather with many Christians' angry response to it. More often than not, I simply hear someone yell back, no, it's not. Let me put it another way. I believe that we, as believers, should be the most radically pro same-sex love. But I bet if that phrase were used in most churches today, it would cause unbelievable controversy. Love is love, but we need to preach in our own churches that love is not sex and love is not marriage. Until we do that, we can't even begin to have a meaningful conversation with Pride attendees or understand why Pride Month matters to them. And yeah, I mean, we love boys, right? That's why we're here. Mm-hmm. But we love boys. Like, part of my sexuality inevitably I have a love for my male friends that is different. It's just inherently different from love that I have for my female friends or females in general. And that's not a shameful thing. That's not an awful thing. It's a beautiful thing that God has wired me, has wired all of us, and many of you listening, that in a beautiful way. And that is something that we should be celebrating, and it's something that we should be proud of. Many years ago, I was attending a conference with hundreds of men and women who loved Jesus with all their hearts. Loved him so much that they would lay their sexualities before him and follow him, regardless of whatever internal or external pulls there were. It was my first ever gathering of such people, and it was so life-giving in so many ways, also triggering in many others. At this conference, I had my first run-in with a crowd of protesters, shouting at the top of their lungs that we were wrong. That not only we were wrong, but we were hurtful. That we were hurting people by gathering together. I'll never forget our first assembly. After all the instruments from worship time died down and someone took the stage to speak, you could hear the shouts just outside the walls, reverberating inside. And if I'm being honest, I was angry. I was angry that I couldn't gather with people who felt the similar conviction to me. I was angry that I couldn't be here in peace, worship God and connect with my fellow man without someone telling me I was in the wrong. I wasn't going into their gatherings. I wasn't telling them how to live. I felt annoyed and I felt angry. Leave us alone and we'll leave you alone was kind of my thoughts, my feelings at the time. And the speaker who took the stage that night, he had angry words for the people just outside our walls. Essentially said that we were right, they were wrong, and while I get the gist of what he was saying, while I still hold true to my same convictions then as I do now, there's something about the tone and something about, well, the pride. Looking back on that experience, I'm no longer angry. I'm just sad. I'm sad at how disjointed humanity has become over the millennia, or at least over the centuries in this particular country. People with vastly differing beliefs. And I feel the weight, especially as a Jesus follower, of wondering how in the world do we all come together. I've long heard it said that God opposes the proud. And when it comes to Pride Month in particular, it's an easy thing to latch onto. That pride is sinful, pride is sinister. God hates pride. And none of those things are necessarily false. Pride is sinister, pride is blinding. Pride assumes you know best, you know all, with no room for a contrary thought, a contrary way. Pride is self-seeking, certainly, but pride is also self-honoring, God-honoring, turned another way. And that line, God opposes the proud, if we expand it just a bit, from 1 Peter 5:5, the ESV reads as follows: "Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble." And regardless whether the other side, be it gay people or what have you, is right or wrong, has the right kind of pride or the wrong kind of pride, is really irrelevant when the call is on us to clothe ourselves with humility toward one another, to check our pride at the door, and to seek humility. Because I think if we believers grow in humility through the years, through the generations and centuries and millennia, I think the far-off hope of unity doesn't seem quite as far. And so, my brothers, you who take great pride in who you are, sexuality, gender, and all, and you who struggle to see the purpose, the beauty, if ever there could be such a thing, you who amply and readily celebrate your fellow man and woman, regardless of belief, and you who wrestle May we ask the Lord daily, asking and asking and asking for humility. Humility to see one another. Humility to listen to one another. And ever more humility to let God be God. To let go and let Him work in us and others as only He can do and does. To let go of our self-seeking, self-furthering pride as we take self-building, self-honoring pride in His handiwork. As He uniquely takes every fiber of our stories, even the rough ones, and with great pride spins them into something beautiful, something even worth celebrating.
All right, you guys, I am thankful for once to end a podcast episode with like fewer questions than we started with. So I'm going to say, Go team. We knocked this one out of the park. We are ready and equipped to go forth and do Pride.
This is really good. No, I was thrilled with this conversation too, because I have lots of questions, but talking with you guys, I don't know that I've ever actually, aside from that blog conversation, which obviously I forgot about because I didn't even remember it up until this prep for this episode. But yeah, it's good to have conversations about Pride Month with other people in this community. So a huge shout out to you guys, but then also to all of our Yobbers who helped kind of make this conversation happen. Like it wasn't necessarily going to. So I'm glad that you guys took it upon yourselves to have this conversation in our community. And I hope to do that more often. Like if I see conversation happening about stuff that matters to our community, like I definitely want to enter into those conversations more speedily, more readily. So thank you guys. Huge shout out to our Yobbers. If you guys have thoughts, I'm sure you do, about Pride Month, head on over to our podcast episode page, yourotherbrothers.com/podcast. Find the episode 81 post on Pride Month. And give us your thoughts. Have you been to Pride? Do you want to go to Pride? Do you not want to go to Pride? What are the motivations? What are the skepticisms? Like, I would love to hear where everyone is coming from, wherever you identify on the spectrum, whether you're affirming, non-affirming, evangelical, ex-evangelical. Like, I'd be curious to hear what anyone in our community or outside of our community has to say if you're listening to this episode. So thanks in advance for sharing your thoughts on our site. And a big shout out to Rainbow Colored Everything. One of my favorite things about TikTok right now is, and I posted on our Discord, is like, and this happens actually from a lot of gay people. I like will stalk their TikToks, and I realize like, okay, this person is gay or queer or however they would identify. And they love to make fun of all the rainbow colored everythings in stores. Like one of my favorite theme of TikToks, because there's not just one, there's so many, is like someone walking through the aisles of Target or walking through the aisles of Walmart or scrolling through pages on Amazon and looking at all of the Pride Month, just like completely garish things. And like, there's like this like doinky kazoo music playing in the background. like look at all this beautiful art that's been created that Target is now selling for Pride Month. Like, it brings such a smile to my face to see those TikToks. So that's like secondary sponsor, but it goes hand in hand, is the people who TikTok all the Pride Month merch out there. Like you said, Ryan, I think I could get down with an accessory, with a bandana, with a bracelet, or I don't know, something like that. But the gay male flag, that is something I feel like I should own something by now that isn't already in my wardrobe. So we'll see.
I was going to say, I'm looking at your picture right now on Zoom, and it is like that flag pretty much. You have like a green hat on. It's like the same shade of green. And then your face is this pale white because of the lighting, sunlight. I'm sure is the only factor in that. And then your shirt is that shade of blue. So you're there. No, you are that flag.
I am a walking, talking gay male flag. So that was the Pride Month podcast. I can't imagine we'll do this every June, but who knows? Maybe like next June we'll do some kind of look back on this. Well, actually, no. If we're gonna go to Pride, like Ryan, I would entertain that idea of going to Pride with you. Maybe that would be a follow-up podcast. Next.
I'll bring my mic and I'll report live from Raleigh Pride. How's that?
That works too. If we all go to our respective cities' Pride, maybe we could have like a little sharing of a news stories. Yeah, that would be fun. Well, this was an awesome conversation. Ryan, Aaron, thanks for joining us. Hope you guys enjoyed it. For all your other brothers, my name is Tom.
God loves you and God likes you and God is proud of you. This is Ryan.
And I'm Aaron.
Reminding you that God loves you and likes you and is proud of you. Yes, that was great. And reminding you that you are not alone. Even the sparrow finds a home. See you next time, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Your Other Brothers podcast. Our show is edited and produced by Thomas Mark Zuniga. Theme music is Fear Is Not My Lover by Nathan Rousseau. We'd love to hear your story. Comment on this or any of our episodes at yourotherbrothers.com/podcast, or share a story to play back on our show by calling us at 706-389-8009. You can also email us at podcast@yourotherbrothers.com or write to us at Your Other Brothers, P.O. Box 843, Asheville, North Carolina 28802. If you enjoy our show, consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Your Other Bros. Finally, if you'd like to further support our storytelling, community building efforts, consider becoming a Yobber. Yobbers pledge monthly on Patreon and receive perks like bonus podcast content, access to a secret Facebook group, regular group calls with fellow patrons and authors, and more. Visit patreon.com/yourotherbros for more information. Until we journey next time, we're glad you're with us.